Today we're discussing some of the most important topics on how to renovate a home in New York City. I'm Ben Dixon, and I'm joined by Noam Dever of Bond Architecture, who's going to give us his insights on just that topic. Noam, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Ben. We're sitting in a loft that we recently finished here in Tribeca. The challenges that we had in this project are relevant to many homeowners or new homeowners that are going through our renovation process. We had to go through the co-op board application, the DOB, finding a contractor, then of course delivering a project that looks as fabulous as this one.
Great, well let's get into it. And what are the first steps someone should take when they're considering a renovation in New York?
What I tell a lot of our clients, and I think you do the same when you work with your clients, is to have a team in place. An architect or maybe even a contractor. What we do with many of our clients is to actually go and tour the property ahead of time, before the purchase. And it's really important to see if some of the visions and some of the ideas that you had for the property actually make sense. How much would they cost? This is one of the largest investments that you're ever going to make in your life. So I think it's important to take another minute, discuss this with professionals, and then if everything makes sense, obviously go and move forward with the purchase.
So this is get your team together early, don't wait, get started early.
Correct, exactly.
What permits and approvals are typically required for a renovation in New York?
That depends on your scope. It's important to know ahead of time what you're planning to achieve. Larger projects, which include structural changes, moving plumbing, moving electricity, of course, require larger scopes and would require permits. Typically, the permit would go to the co-op or the condo board, then to the Department of Building. And if you're so lucky to have a landmark building, of course, you would need another few weeks for the Landmark Committee of New York.
So this is know your scope. Get started on those early again to be able to manage that process.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to speak to your real estate agent or your architect about the vision you have for this and understand, is this a 6 months or a 2-year project?
Yeah, exactly. So how do co-op and condo board approvals affect the renovation process?
In larger buildings, typically Upper West Side, Upper East Side, when there is a stronger government and more of a history of projects that went away or project took forever to complete, there's a little bit more hesitation to provide approval on the first go. We tell our clients typically to expect 4 to 6 months of review period, and then they're good to go to the Department of Building.
So every building has its own personality, and check with your real estate agent who hopefully understands those boards so you can set your expectations right.
Yeah, that's correct.
We're in New York, so how can homeowners make their spaces feel bigger without actually adding any new square footage?
One of the key items for making a space look bigger and feel bigger is daylight. In this project here in Tribeca, we had a wall separating the living room from the bedroom. So what we decided to do in order to get a little bit more daylight and also to get the view of all 3 windows as you walk in is to install a fixed panel of glass with these beautiful moons over here that make the room feel much larger and also allow daylight from the bedroom to enter the living room.
I love that it brings that light in and that you can close that curtain off and get some privacy, but right now you get to enjoy the entire space. What advice would you give a buyer looking to renovate in a landmarked or historic building?
While it's not necessarily more complicated to get the approval of the Landmark Preservation Committee, it's usually one step, I think it's really important to look at the actual condition of the property, especially if we're looking into townhouses or buildings that have a lot of area and a lot of systems. My advice would be here to bring an architect and a general contractor, potentially somebody that already works in historic properties, to look at the property to understand if there are any structural issues. Construction costs could really escalate if you don't identify these items ahead of time. So it's really important to have another set of professional eyes look at the project and help you understand if this is the right purchase for you.
So this is more due diligence up front to make sure you don't have any surprises later.
Absolutely, that's the way to go.
What's the best way for our buyers to hire a reliable contractor for their project?
There are 2 ways to find a contractor. The first way would be to discuss this with your architect. He probably worked with enough contractors that have worked on similar scope, similar scale, and would have a few names in mind. The second way, which I think is really helpful, is actually talk to your neighbors or your new neighbors. Yeah. Many times co-ops would like to see the same contractor working in the building again and again, and it might even make the approval process a little easier.
So get to know your neighbors early and try to get somebody who's worked in that building. Makes it go a lot smoother, right?
Correct.
What advice would you give for someone who is renovating for resale versus personal use?
The key here is future-proofing. So if you're looking at the property, think what additional amenities or additional spaces would make sense when you sell the apartment. If you have space to make a little home office or a gym, that could also be a second bedroom, go for it. If you can install a washer or a dryer, things that are really, really valuable in New York, go for it. Generally, my advice is always to buy the best type of property in the best location.
So buy in the best building, buy in the best location. You're starting to sound like a real estate broker now.
I try not to, but thank you.
When do I need an architect versus an interior designer versus a decorator?
That's a question that we get asked quite a lot. I think it's important to understand that the decorator really focuses on the furnishing, on the different finishes of the apartment, on the drapes, on the furniture selection, while the architect is in charge on the structural changes. An architect could be a decorator or an interior designer, but a decorator can't be an architect. So if you're going for any large changes in the property that you have, you definitely need an architect.
So colors, finishes, any of these professions can do that. But if I'm looking to move walls, plumbing, electrical, call my architect.
That's correct.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you for your expertise today. Renovating in New York can feel overwhelming, but if you have the right team in place and the right plan, you can do it, and it is totally worth it. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much, Ben. I can't wait for the next time.
And thank you for joining us. If you have any questions about renovating in New York, please feel free to reach out. The next move is yours.